This is Friday Conversations on the 31st of May, 2024. Just a quick introduction. Friday Conversations is a non-partisan political discussion group. Why political? Because we discuss issues of social concern, right? And we do not take any party political position at all. We are totally independent. Okay, so today's topic is really about a part of a series where we want to basically know ourselves more before we can ever think about what we want to do about the future. So know ourselves, then know the future. Now we have three speakers. First was Yusmadi. Unfortunately, he's from Malaysia. He used to be a senator. Last minute he could not make it because he has to entertain some visitors from China. Can you imagine that, from China coming to Malaysia, right? Investors, it's quite a big deal. So in his place, very kindly, Jay Ishaq Rajoo, our famous Jay, has decided at last minute to heed my call, and he's coming in to speak on behalf of the Indian Muslim community and also as a Muslim himself, right? The first speaker actually will be Alex Tan. He will speak about the Chinese business communities in the past and how they have shaped Singapore. Of course, the Chinese communities are also rather dynastic in a way. They have their own family and clan groups and so on and so forth. And finally, we have Mr. CS Chong, who will speak to us. He's a historian. He's a great student of Chinese history. He will talk to us about dynastic politics in China. Okay, all right. So let me just say a few words about dynastic politics in Singapore. There's a strange reason, for some strange reason, I think not so strange after all, because it is kind of embedded in our kind of social consciousness that children of eminent people would carry on the tradition of their forebears, and so therefore they could lead in politics, right? Therefore you have a Lee Hsien Loong who took over from Mr. Lee Kuan Yew, and there has been a lot of talk about possibility of another Lee coming in as a third generation Lee family. So people are thinking like that, right? Why should we be thinking like that? And that's a question we should ask ourselves, because in a modern society, right, based on meritocracy and so on, why do we need to have a family ties and so on? Okay, so this is something we need to understand ourselves, right? So let me begin by asking Alex Tan to start off by telling us about how Chinese business in Singapore has developed, and who these pioneers are, and how they have shaped Singapore. On to you, Alex.
Thank you. Thank you all. Now, dynastic legacy adopted by Chinese entrepreneurs is traced from Confucianism. It embedded a patriarchal value system that the Chinese will sustain his family to ensure it continues through its progeny. The business enterprise he built will eventually be passed on to his children to continue in a family business. This is survivalism. The children, upon growing up, will be inculcated with Confucian tenets and beliefs of obedience, allegiance, and loyalty. Learning the ropes as apprentices, they are groomed to be eventual successors. Now, this mindset captures the important business philosophy that family ties and kinships are a unitary wholeness and is to continue, which explains the obligatory duty on the father in becoming polygamous, thereby enhancing the procreation of his own pedigree. A case in point is Wee Chong Hum, one of the richest magnate of his generation. He had 8 wives who gave him 26 children. Wee Chong Ham, himself a beneficiary of his father's huge legacy, expanded his father's Tian Guan Company, founded in 1862, to become an even bigger company, converting it into a conglomerate with involvement in agriculture, to trade, to manufacturing. He renamed the company the Wee Chong Ham Concern and became known as the Sugar King. The Wee dynasty continued into the third generation until 1961, when the Indonesian government sequestrated the company and its assets. The Wee Chong Ham Park along Holland Road is named after him. The Teochew leader Seah Yu Chin, who died in 1883, was an early Singapore pioneer who started as a shipping clerk and then ventured on his own with a business enterprise that later made him one of the richest overseas Chinese in Singapore, and who founded the Ngian Kongsi in 1845. He had several sons, all of whom continued in the family business, and each one became prosperous in his own right. Their names are memorialized in the streets of Singapore. The father, Seah Yu Chin, the street, Yu Chin Street, is located in Tiong Bahru. Son, Seah Liang Seah, Yang Seah Street, located in Bugis MRT area. And another son, Seah Pek Seah, the Pek Seah Road in Tanjung Pagar area. The breeding of offsprings is biased towards the birth of sons. They were much favored than daughters. This is reflected historically in feudal China, where the birth rate was high so as to enable the high chances of sons being born. And all sons became the mainstay in servicing the hardships of a peasantry economy. This feudal culture continues with the overseas Chinese community, and we can see its manifestation where sons were the biggest beneficiaries in the family inheritance, as opposed to the daughters who were meant to be married away to another son from another equally rich family. Though succession is through lineage in sons, there is also the authoritarianism and unquestioned submission to the patriarch. Ao Boon Hao and his brother Ao Boon Pa of the Hao Pa group, and also known as Tiger Balm Kings, displayed immense dominance over their family huge business. Boon Hao's successor, nephew Ao Cheng Chai, will mirror the qualities of his uncle in terms of leadership and business acumen. Other ancillary qualities of the successor would include hard work, honesty, frugality, and importantly, the welfareism of employees, because leaders of corporation needed good workers and subordinates. Lee Kong Chian was reputed to be most generous in paying his employees who remained loyal to the end. The disciplinary attitude acquired from Confucianist instruction will orientate the thoughts of the successors to two important attributes. Firstly, the Quan Si, that is, the human relations aspect on the ability to maintain personal connection. Such a quality will set the stage for a network of opportunities in business dealings. Secondly, the Sing Yong, or deep friendship that will engender trust and faith, and therefore the ability to be creditworthy by honoring one's word. The word is his bond. To establish Quan Si, the Chinese businessman will engage with involvement in the various commercial and industrial guilds. For example, the Goldsmith Association, the Shipbuilders Association, or the Importers and Exporters Association, which is a very powerful body to promote and protect general business interests. And then another important point of network are the Hui Kwans, the Hokkien Hui Kwan, Ngian Kongsi, the King-Chiu Hui Kwan, and also the clan associations like the Tan Si Chong Su, which was promoted by two prominent Hokkien partners, Tan Kim Cheng, the son of Tan Tok Seng, and Tan Beng Sui, the son of Tan Kim Seng. Tan Tock Seng was one of the first Hokkien immigrant from Malacca. He started life in Singapore as a retailer in food supply. Through wise business equity, he soon became the richest man in the country. He gave back to society what he had earned by channeling his wealth through philanthropy. And as the wealthiest Hokkien, he was entrusted with Pang power and leadership, which effectively made him the overlord of the Hokkien clan. The word Pang can be defined as a dialect group originating from a point of geographical identity and sharing strong sectarian interests. The Hokkiens will use the word Tong Hiong, colloquially a brotherhood. The Tan Tock Seng Hospital is the single most significant contribution in the philanthropy of the man himself. Tan Tock Seng's son, Tan Kim Cheng, continued the legacy of his millionaire father and thus perpetuated the family dynasty. He too was bestowed with Pang leadership of the Hokkiens. He was instrumental in establishing the Tanjung Pagar Dock Company, but because it grew to become a gigantic enterprise with potential for the state monopoly, that the government thought fit to take over the company. Today, it is the PSA, or the Port of Singapore Authority. Tan Kim Cheng brought forth another generation to continue the family dynasty. His grandson, Tan Buliat, even rose to national prominence as a local worthy. Today, his house, which he named the Golden Bell Mansion, has been recorded under the Preservation of Monuments listing. It is located in Teluk Blangah today. I mentioned Tan Kim Seng earlier. He was another wealthy man. His personal business organization, the Kim Seng Company, owned vast tracts of land along the Singapore River, stretching into River Valley Road. Again, through the network of the clan associations, he succeeded Tan Tock Seng in leadership of the Hokkien Pang. His son, Tan Beng Swee, enhanced the family wealth by being a savvy businessman himself. Now, he in turn succeeded by yet another equally savvy son by the name of Tan Jiak Kim, and the third generation of Tan Kim Seng. Both of their names are memorialized in the streets along Great World MRT station. Why do Chinese go into business? Now, early Chinese settlers could not penetrate the exclusive domain of colonial polity, where English is the lingua franca. There were no means for them to join in the prospects of the civil service bureaucracy. The restrictive opportunities only made them to be self-reliant and self-sufficient. Hence, the entry into business, the proverbial rags to riches story. Lok Yu started life in humble circumstances, working in a provision shop. In later years, he was to be one of the richest tin miner. His son, Lok Wan To, continued the dynastic line by venturing into insurance and banking, and eventually to own the Cathay organization, which ran numerous cinemas over Malaya and Singapore. A street is named after him, which is along Hill Street, just opposite of the Chinese Chamber of Commerce building. Si Hu Kay, a businessman from Malacca, came to Singapore and bought parcels of land to become one of the biggest landowners. He became richer. His son, Si Eng Wat, expanded the family business and grew even wealthier. Eng Wat Street in Tiong Bahru is named after him. The grandsons, Si Yu Lei and Si Yu Boon, continued to sustain the family wealth. Yu Boon Road along Bukit Timah is named after him. The fourth generation of the dynasty, Si Tiong Wah, son of Si Yi Boon, became a prominent businessman and a bank comprador with the Hong Kong and Shanghai Bank. He became a public figure, being involved in municipal matters like roads, drainage, power supply. He was one time the president of the Chinese Chamber of Commerce. Another rags to riches who started with a humble beginning was Yong Yit Ling, who became a giant in the building construction business when his company, the Woh Hub, undertook important projects like the construction of Clifford Pier, the McDonald House along Orchard Road, and the Changi Prison. His children continued with the business, and today, Woh Hub continues as a flourishing concern, now controlled by one of the great-grandsons. In a matter of interest, Yong Yit Lim died as a result of an assassination perpetrated by one of his ex-employees in 1950. It is said the funeral procession was one of the longest ever carried out. Wong Ah Fook arrived from China a poor man working as a carpenter. His hard work made him a man of wealth and influence, and eventually a close companion of the Johor Sultan Abu Bakr. He is honored with a road named after him in Johor Bahru, the Wong Ah Fook Road. His prominent son, Dato' S.Q. Wong, continued the line of his family dynasty in the field of banking and insurance, namely the OCBC and Great Eastern Life, two very powerful corporations. A grandson, Alfred Wong, was the architect who designed the first cantilever in the construction of our National Theatre in 1963. Today, the theatre no longer is in existence. Lim Ho Pua arrived from Amoy in China at an early age and was recruited into the family business of Wee Bin. His business competency expanded the company into a flourishing shipping business that Mr. Wee Bin enthusiastically arranged for Ho Pua to marry his daughter. Their children, Lim Peng Xiang and Lim Peng Mao, became the obvious heirs of the Wee Bin Company. Under the management of Lim Peng Xiang, the company was dissolved and restarted under the style of the Ho Hong Group of companies that included steamship, oil mill, rice mill, cement production, soap factory, and even a bank, the Ho Hong Bank, which later merged to form the OCBC. Such was the extent of wealth from the second generation of Lim Ho Pua. Unfortunately, the dynasty did not flourish into the third line of succeeding generation. Another rag to riches story, Ong Sam Leong, had little education and started life at a young age of 29 years when he became a contractor to supply workers for the phosphate mining in Christmas Island. His hard work and intelligence drew him to engage into other new business opportunities to serve the growing community on Christmas Island, such as a provision shop, an accommodation quarters, and even a remittance shop to handle transfer of funds. He became rich and eventually invested his wealth in real estates, owning large areas where today is the Jalan Besar area. The name Sam Leong Road is in the heart of Jalan Besar, which is named after him. His two sons, Ong Boon Tat and Ong Peng Hock, inherited their father's fortune and with their business acumen, invested into other businesses, one of which was the New World Amusement Park. Ong Boon Tat has a road named after him, which is along Robinson Road. His only son, T.W. Ong, became a lawyer who partnered with John Laycock to form the legal firm of Laycock and Ong, to which, in 1950, they recruited and employed two young legal assistants upon their return from Cambridge University. Their names, Lee Kuan Yew and Kwa Geok Choo. This chart traces the link in the story of Mrs. Lee Kuan Yew or Kwa Geok Choo. We start with Wee Tiam Seng, whose brother Wee Tiam Tew was one of the earliest lawyers in Singapore and who was responsible in instilling Dr. Lim Boon Keng with a love for reading that eventually led Lim Boon Keng to become one of Singapore's most prominent and famous personality. Boon Keng MRT is named after him. Brother Wee Tiam Seng has two daughters. The first, Wee Yu Neo, is married to Kwa Siu Ti, who is the father of Kwa Geok Choo, and thus the father-in-law of Lee Kuan Yew. The second daughter, Helen Wee, is married to Tan Chin Tuan, the longtime managing director and chairman of OCBC. Tan Chin Tuan's nephew is former President Dr. Tony Tan, and who also is a descendant of Tan Kim Seng that was discussed earlier. Tan Yan Kiam was born in 1881 in China and came to Singapore to earn a living. He went into the rubber business at its lucrative period and became a man of wealth, which he invested in banking and property. A practitioner in Confucianism, he believed in balancing his life wisely between business and charity. Furthermore, Tan Yan Kiam improved his well-being in literary pursuits. Yang Kiam Place, located in Katong, is named after him. His son, Tan Tock Sam, continued his father's legacy as a banker. The Tan Yang Kiam Foundation was set up for philanthropy in keeping with Confucianist tradition and is today managed by the third generation Tan Kheng Lek, a property owner. Kheng Lek has now already prepared in the grooming of his only son to continue the Tan Yang Kiam dynasty into its fourth generation. The story of wealth from Chinese merchants continually growing into the succeeding generation is not customary or conventional. There were adversities. A case in point is the story of the Aurora, a leading Chinese-owned departmental store located in the shopping hub of North Beach Road. Its competitor was CK Tang. The European counterpart in the departmental store business was Robinsons and John Little, located in central Raffles Place. All went defunct except for CK Tang, which continued into the second generation today. The owner of Aurora, a businessman of Hokkien origin, engaged a highly competent employee to be general manager of the store. Under his charge, Aurora grew in popularity and profits. The owner then passed on the business to his son to continue with a legacy. The son terminated the services of the competent and capable manager and ran the department store himself, but he wasn't successful. Aurora was forced to close down. The manager, who was earlier released from service, then started a similar business to Aurora and had it located a few shops away from Aurora. The shop grew to become Metro Department Store today with 12 branches in Singapore and Indonesia. A fine example of how meritocracy can trump dynastic succession. I now come to the ending part of my presentation with the illustration of Tan Kah Kee, who embodies the entire gamut of the overseas Chinese spirit and energy, that ethos and fiber in entrepreneurship. His character and nature define the essence of the man that made him the example to other overseas Chinese on the dynamics of survivalism in a foreign land of alien culture and language. From an ordinary immigrant, he rose to become the richest man outside China, and then the leading philanthropist of his time, who founded a university, to high political position appointed by China's new communist government, an unusual story of that strange dichotomy of a capitalist in his own right, but yet embraced by Mao Zedong, the first leader of a communist government of China in 1949. His formative years was trained in Confucian instruction. His father had earlier emigrated to Singapore in search of a living by dealing in rice trading. At age 16, he traveled to Singapore to assist his father as an apprentice. A few years later, the business failed, and Tan Kah Kee was on his own to survive. He started a trading company called Kiam Egg to import and export agricultural products, but on a small scale, which he later expanded to include pineapple canning and also rice trading, which is his traditional specialty. What sets him apart from his father was his intrinsic qualities of a risk taker and an innovator. He was a man of ideas. He was also a gentleman in the Confucian tradition, embracing virtues of thrift, honesty, and trustworthiness. Besides, he was also tenacious and adventurous, but importantly, he was independent-minded. His first recruitment was employing his own brother, whom he could trust with the daily cash transactions. As his small trading grew to incorporate bigger industries, he would employ people of his Pang connection. the Tong Hyong, or brotherhood. For example, he employed Tan Lak Sai from his own village in Chip Bi or Chimay, and who later was to set up his own enterprise, the Egg Ho Company, to become another rubber magnate and millionaire, and founder of Nanyang University, copying and aping Tan Kah Kie's own Amoy University. In time, the business acumen of Tan Kah Kie enabled him to enlarge his company Kiam Egg to become a conglomerate which was renamed Tan Kah Kie Company to incorporate his core business in rubber products, pineapple canning, rice mill, tin mining, sawmill, sugar plantation, tropical produce, and then diversifying into shipping, manufacturing of consumer goods, real estate, and banking. To run his conglomerate, he adopted a paternalistic style of management, which is autocratic in form and substance, where domination comes from the apex top and flowing downwards like a pyramid. And because the size of his business organization grew so large, he had to even recruit his sons-in-law, which also served as the next stage in succession. This would be easy because he had 4 wives and 18 children, in keeping with the traditional practice of a polygamous marriage with multiple children. His eldest daughter is married to Lee Kong Chian, who in turn established his own dynasty with the Lee family company and his legacy in the Lee Foundation. The second daughter was married to the son of Lim Nee Soon, a prominent merchant and community leader and who owned that part of Singapore today known as Yishun. The third daughter is married to branch manager of the company by the name of Po Ting Kok, whose eldest son is the well-known political activist Dr. Po Shu Kai. The fourth daughter married to Un Kai Hong, who earned the distinction of being the first local to graduate with a degree from MIT in America. He took charge as manager of Tan Kah Kie's rubber factory. Another son-in-law, Lee Tian Yu, a man of scholarship and a well-known school principal, was appropriately employed as editor and manager of Tan Kah Kie's newspaper, the Nanyang Siang Pao. And then we have Chu Pik Leong, the son of Chu Hian Sui, a close revolutionary comrade of Sun Yat-sen, and he is married to Tan Kah Kie's niece. He too worked for Tan Kah Kie. It is this cohesiveness of family involvement that brought success to Tan Kah Kie's business dynasty. Unfortunately, he could not last into the second half of the 20th century. The events and circumstances of the world affected his business, and Tan Kah Kie had to discontinue his business. Dr. Po Shu Kai is one of 2 founding members of the PAP that is still living today. The other is Ong Pang Boon, a former Minister for Home Affairs, Education, Labour and Environment. Now, the Sun Yat-sen Museum today was where Sun Yat-sen stayed during one of his visits to Singapore as he prepares in organizing his revolution to overthrow the Qing dynasty. Tan Kah Kie's 2 brothers-in-law, Lim Nee Soon and Chu Hian Sui, was close comrades of Sun Yat-sen. Lee Kong Chian is remembered in his philanthropy towards the School of Medicine in NTU. Now, today, some of the main players in family business dynasty include Hong Leong Group, founded by Kwek Hong Peng and continuing into Kwek Ling Beng and children. The Fowries organization set up by Ng Teng Fong and inherited by Robert and Philip Ng, and the appearance of a 3rd-generation grandson. UOB, founded by Wee King Chiang in 1935 and continued by his son Wee Cho Yao, and today helmed by the grandson Wee Ee Chong. That's it. I have finished.
Well, thanks very much, Alex, for educating us on the history of how these Chinese pioneer entrepreneurs contributed to the building of Singapore, right? And indeed, the place names, the street names, the buildings, the localities, and so on, are historical memorials of the contributions these great pioneers have contributed to Singapore. And of course, we need to ask ourselves what actually happened to all of them. And the strange paradox of Tan Kah Kie's tie up with Mao Zedong, right? Between capitalism and communism, right? It's a very strange reminder, in fact, a presage of today's new China, in which capitalism and private enterprise, as well as state-owned enterprises, coexist, right, to build a new China and therefore a new Asia. Yes. I hope we are able to get hold of CS Chong now. Yeah. Is it possible to get CS online?
Jay will go next.
In that case, we'll ask Jay, the famous Jay Ishaq Rajoo, to
Yeah.
take off from what Alex has just said, right?
Okay. Now I have a confession. I thought Muslim men can marry 4 wives, but I think Chinese businessmen have got this lah. They are the
8 wives, 8 wives.
they can go double, triple, man. This, I mean, that's the way. I think probably we learn from them lah. But I'm surprised they didn't have any mental issues back then. You know, nowadays we have a lot of issues. They don't have any issues with that. Okay, and so thanks, Prof, for giving me this opportunity. I wish you had told me this a few days earlier instead of a few hours earlier. But all in good hope. Okay, I like I said, I didn't have enough time to draw out at what Alex did. He put out you know, street names and why they were named after them, and spoke about the pioneers and all. You know, I hope I can do some justice. I'm going to be very brief. I won't be so long.
Just speak from your heart, Jay.
Yeah.
Speak from your heart. Yeah.
Notes and, okay, let me start off by saying thank you to one of our great Indian Muslims of our time, and I would like to say thank you to Miss Halima Yaakob. Can you see her picture?
Yes.
Yes, our famous Indian Muslim who became a person of a different race to run for presidency, you know. Okay, so now let's look at why Indians. I'm going to cover 2 areas, roughly more on Indian Muslims, of course, that's what I was asked to speak to. But the Indian immigrants movement and the Indian Muslims movements are very intertwined. You know, in fact, my grandfather came to Singapore. He was Indian, of course, Hindu, and he brought in his distant relatives who were Muslims. And so I will talk about this story a bit later. But let's look at why most of the immigrants left India. They were they came way before even the British came in. They came in on a record show. Even by the 13th century, they were already here in Singapore because they came in as traders. They were merchants and businessmen and doing trading. And so it became, the movement became more during the time of the British rule because there was exploitation in India. People were not making enough money, as you know. When India's economy was about 24% of the world's trading economies, and then it dropped drastically because the British were exploiting India's resources and so on. So a lot of people were not making the money they were making, and so they had to get out to find better work overseas. So the earlier people, the immigrants that came to Singapore, were often traders and seafarers. And the Indian Muslims were, because they were also living in the coastal area, they were very good seafarers. And naturally, they were trading colonies. So a lot of traders came in earlier. And then when the British came in, Sir Stamford Raffles, he brought in his soldiers who were Indians, of course, to Singapore. And also he brought along Indian Muslims as well as Indian, because of their proficiency in English. They could speak English well. So it really helped them do business in Asia. So he brought along the soldiers, and then he brought along people who could speak well as well. And so the earlier movement was people who were doing business, who were also proficient in the language. And also another part was the indentured Indians. These are Indians who signed a contract with the British, with colonizers, and had contract work, because what happened is after the abolition of slavery, the British were looking for cheap labor, very cheap labor. And so what they did was they decided, let's use the Indians to sign contracts. And some of them were even told that they were going to work in Calcutta or Sri Lanka. And so they, from the north of India or wherever they are, they were put on ships, and then they were just channeled to different parts of the world. And quite a lot of them were also brought into Malaysia, and via Malaysia, Singapore. And so these were the indentured Indians, and some of them, didn't have, even the ones that went to what you call Caribbean islands and all that, they never went back to India. They just became slaves, actually. So they were very lowly paid, cheap labor. And so that's that part of the world. So let's come back to how the Indians and Indian Muslims came to Singapore. So when they came in, they set up businesses, and their businesses were around the coastal area in Singapore as well, harbourfront and so on. And they also brought in people who were money changers. And they also set up businesses like medical shops and pharmaceutical shops and all. They were good in that. They were good in textiles. India was known for its textiles. So these are the traders. Even people who were going towards China or other parts of Southeast Asia often stopped in Singapore to start off with trade and all that. They were also doing perfumes, because they were going to Arab countries doing perfumes. And so they found that Singapore had a very steady economy, very stable, and quite a good place to stay. It was very welcoming. We are also very welcoming to foreigners right now. So they had the same mindset back then. So they found that they could actually stay in Singapore, and they brought in their own community. Like when my grandfather was from South India, Kalayanallur, which is quite popular because we have the Kalayanallur Indian Muslim Association, the Kalayanallur Muslim League, which is still operating and present till today. So they worked very well together as a community, actually. So when my grandfather came in, he brought in his community, and a big Indian Muslim community was also brought to Singapore. And one of them actually is Mr. Masudum Abdul Rahiman, who wrote this book, actually, Singapore Tamil Muslims, which is a very good book. He wrote it in Tamil, and then it's been translated to English. And you can get lots of information from there. So he actually underlines the movement of Indian Muslims to Singapore. So what happened was, when they came here, they had different areas they were working at, different tradings and so on. And so they flourished in the business they were doing. And from 1810 to 1820, you had about 58% of the population who were Indian Muslims, actually. And so they came together as a community and set up a newspaper organization, printers and all that, and then published newspaper. And they even set up, one of the pioneers was Syed Mahidin, I think, first to start the newspaper. And there were a lot of primary schools all over Asia, but they were the first one. Singapore Indian Muslims were Indians were the first one who set up Tamil schools, secondary schools in the whole of Southeast Asia. And one of them existed for a very long time, even during the time when I was in secondary school, Umar Pulavar Tamil Palli, Umar Pulavar Secondary School. Even my mom went to Umar Pulavar, actually. So I think it was probably the school stopped functioning in the early 1980s, And so they set up associations. And then once they were very stable, they started bringing in their extended family to Singapore. And the community grow. And so what happened was they felt that as a community, they were working very individually. So they wanted to set up a central organization so they can help each other and so on. Like I said, even when my grandfather brought in his family and his friends and his community, he was quite established in Little India, Tekka area, and people know him. And so what he did was he got them, set up lodging for them to stay with their families if they brought their families in, and he also set up work and businesses for them. So that's what my grandfather did. And whenever immigrants came to Singapore, he will be one of the person who will be in charge of all this. And so the Muslims came together and started the Muslim Improvement Club, MIC, in 1926. But then what happened was there was, because they are from different parts of India, maybe the languages could have been different, culturally could have been quite different. So they started congregating in their own area or their own congregation, their own cliques. And so then it became very individualistic again, and then they started organizing their own events, and then everybody was, going back to the same thing where it was not really united. And so that was disbanded, and then the Singapore Tin Kasih Muslim Welfare Society was formed in 1940. Japanese time. Japanese were coming in already. And in 1941, the Singapore Kadayanallur Muslims organization was set up. They settled around, most of the Muslims you would see were in Tanjung Pagar areas, Rangoon Road, Geylang, and even Arab Street. So you will find businesses there till like perfumes and all. Arab Street is still there going on. And of course, let's not talk about the textile shops in Serangoon Road and so on, and Geylang area. So they are still existent. So I mean, big contributors, the Indian community in Singapore, together with the Chinese and the Malay and the Eurasians, of course, we all played a part in what Singapore is today. A lot of credit must go to them. People often say the pioneer generation or the early settlers and all that. Not enough emphasis have been made to actually accolade them with what is happening today. I teach in schools, and I feel that still there's not enough recognition. Maybe lessons might be taught, it might be one of a subject or they talk about it, but the young people today do not really recognize the contributions of the pioneers. It's sad. My generation, I think, probably will be the last to understand, because I knew my grandfather, and so he told me stories and the hardships of what happened during those times when they came down and settled in Singapore. Whereas right now, the kids now, like my son, does not have my grandfather to speak to. So he speaks to me. Even my father has passed on. So there is a big gap, a certain part of history that has not been taught to them. Not every parent make that effort, or they have very little knowledge on the first generation of folks to come into Singapore. Like I know my mother's father very well, my maternal grandfather very well. His name was K. Lingam, Kutra Lingam. He also went on to work for a bus company and became a union leader for the Indians back then. In fact, during the Hockley riots and all, he was one of the men who had meetings with Mr. LKY and spoke to him about, improving conditions for, laborers and all, and increasing the salary. So he fought for that. He knew Mr. Lee Kuan Yew quite well. So he tells us all these rich stories that you cannot read in books. And so the generation of today lacks this detail. They read, anybody can read a book, but then to understand and to feel connected is something that they don't. So when the government talks about the pioneer generation, or even what Mr. Lee Kuan Yew has done in years to come, that might be forgotten. So, you know, he has books and all that, but then, you know, yeah, I don't want to get into too much politics, but it's sad that the younger generation is not aware. Even during the time of the Japanese occupation, my mother was 1 year old and she was sent to India by my grandfather, but he stayed on. He stayed on to do whatever he can for the Singaporeans here. Though he was an immigrant back then, he took it upon himself to stay back. He could have gone back to his village back in India and stayed safe and wait for the war to be over and come back, but he didn't do that. He sent my grandma and my mom, who was the firstborn, back to India, and he stayed on to help his community here. So such sacrifices they have made during hard times. You know, even the knowledge of the World War is very vague among young kids nowadays. So this is something that we have to keep on teaching and make sure they know this history. And also they can also then, if they do that, they can have a correlation of how the pioneers or the early immigrants were back then and compare them to now, how we have progressed. Even coming back to our leaders, they can have a measure of how the leaders back then were and how they are now. So they can understand things better. Yeah, so that's all I have. Like I said, I had 2-3 hours and I was on the road driving, so I had to prepare at the same time. I know I didn't do justice to a lot of Indian Muslims in Singapore. But
thank you very much, Jay. I think what you've just said is terribly important, no? That young people today don't know our own history, right?
Yes.
And in fact, it was brought home to me very recently when I was speaking to a group of young architects, right?
Yeah.
They don't even know who is Goh Keng Swee. Can you imagine that? Yeah. So I think your idea of a kind of visual and audio history, right, is a very good idea. I think maybe Friday's conversation should take it up. We could do very short videos, right, interviewing the pioneers, people like yourself and Alex and a few others, right, the older ones who have personal knowledge of some of these old pioneers, you know, to tell their stories, right, in a very simple and short way, right? I mean, we could use TikTok and stuff like that, right? Okay,
correct.
so I think this could be a very good project. Thank you very much, Jay. So let me ask for the next speaker. Is CS Chong going to be coming on?
Yeah, he's here. CS, can you speak up? You there? CS? We can't hear you, CS. Okay, now CS actually given me a video to play on his behalf. So let me go ahead to play his video while we sort out the audio issues. Just give me.
Family, nation, all under heaven. For millennia, the ancients lived in harmony, a peace made possible by responsibility and connection to a greater humanity. Nothing like this ever happened. 家国天下 is just a political vision of what an ideal world would be like, encompassing geography and morality, subjectivity and politics. In this framework of family, nation, all under heaven, there was no concept of self. The family is the smallest unit. For example, the Chaoshan phrase 家己囊 or 家己人 in Mandarin exemplifies this. This traditional value system, however, has been increasingly eroded and challenged, and it even collapsed during the late Qing dynasty. The Qing government and intellectual class both tried to make China a modern nation state by embracing Western-style modernity. But even in China today, where it might be offensive to say 家几人 instead of 自己人, 鸡犬升天 is common. Metaphorically, the proverb chicken and dogs turn immortal means that whenever one gets a government job, all his buddies get them too. 国. In ancient China, the concept of nation was different from our concept of nation state. Neither nationalism nor shared national identity existed, and no government represented the will of the people over a sovereign territory. The Chinese were feudal, so their territories were governed by reciprocity. Rulers were expected to be righteous, and the people were expected to show fealty. Heaven gives its mandate to a virtuous ruler who must be just and capable. When the ruler gets overthrown, it's a sign that they have lost the mandate. Throughout Chinese history, this concept has been used to legitimize rebellions and install new emperors. The doctrine of the mandate of heaven predates Taoism, which was founded during the Qin Dynasty, Buddhism, which was introduced to China during the Han Dynasty, and Confucianism, which was founded during the Spring and Autumn period. It was first used by King Wu of Zhou, who rebelled against the Shang Dynasty and founded the Zhou Dynasty. King Wu and his family invoked the mandate of heaven to legitimize his revolt because he thought the Shang Dynasty no longer served the people's interests, and therefore it had forfeited the mandate between the monarchy and the Shangti, the god of law, order, and justice. The mandate of heaven was thus defined as the God's blessing on a just ruler and ruled by divine mandate. When the government no longer served the will of the gods, that government would be overthrown. Moreover, there could only be one legitimate ruler of China, and his rule had to be legitimized by his proper conduct as a steward of the lands entrusted to him by heaven. The rule could be passed on from father to son, as long as the child had the right virtues. The mandate would later be manipulated by various rulers to give succession to unworthy children. 天下, all under heaven, is a Chinese term for a historical cultural concept that denotes either the entire geographical world or the metaphysical realm of mortals, and later became associated with political sovereignty. It formed the basis of a worldview that first began with the Chinese court, next expanded outward to major and minor officials, then common subjects, after that tributary states, and finally ending with fringe barbarians. This worldview probably started during the Shang Dynasty, an era of tribal alliances. The kings of each nation, or guo, pledged fealty to the Son of Heaven, who granted them lordship over their territories. The Zhou kingdom, for example, was a tribute nation of the Shang Dynasty. Qiao Dai, an emperor's reign is called Qiao. Here, dynasty means government of state administration, and it has the concept of one regime ruling the world at present. It is different from Guo, which the ancient Chinese regards as a vassal state or tribute nation. Dai is a convenient way to divide history. Ancient officials use the term dynasty to distinguish historical periods of a certain regime. In the concept of family and tianxia, the monarch family is the dominant one, with change of dynasty meaning changing the ruling family. So the first three kings of the state of Zhou are not counted as part of the Zhou dynasty. The Zhou dynasty started with King Wu, who conquered Shang and established the Zhou dynasty. Huaxia. Huaxia is a historical concept. It came from the recognition of a common cultural ancestry and represented the Chinese nation. It's the name of the ancient Central Plains region. The term Huaren for a Chinese person is an abbreviation of Huaxia with Ren or person.
I think a lot of us in this Friday conversation, we are very interested in history. So what CS talked about the Zhou dynasty succeeding from the Shang dynasty. Interesting fact, during the Shang and the Zhou dynasty, the term Huang actually is with 3 horizontal strokes and 1 vertical stroke. So they were known as king of kingdoms. So the country of China was still very fragmented. But it was the dynasty after Zhou, the Qing dynasty, QIN, which first became the real emperor of China because he controlled all of China, which is called Tianxia. And I was watching this on Netflix the other day. So the history of the Qing Shi Wang, or the first emperor of China, is super interesting because they were a small tribe also when it started, but they fought and they rebelled against everybody. And finally, after I think 4 generations, the fourth generation was called Ying Zhen. Ying Zhen became the first emperor of China, but that was after conquering all the neighboring states like Wu, Han, all those dynasties. CS, are you in?
Made you all do this part of talking about early immigration to Singapore? Is there any link between how you view back then and now, or was it just
Can you ask him to unmute? Unmute. Okay. You want to address that?
Yeah, I mean we are in a very interesting moment of change in Singapore, right? We have a new prime minister, right?
Yeah.
And then the world is also in a very strange conflict situation, and so on. So I think that before we even begin to think about how Singapore should be changed and what kind of direction we should be taking, we better start by knowing ourselves first. So this is the reason why we are having this series, right? And
Right.
I think that the fact that we are a multiracial society, multicultural society, I think the last since what is this, maybe 60 over years, in which I think there has been a development of a Singaporean identity. Yes, of course, we are still Chinese, Malay, Indians, and Indian Muslims, and so on and so forth. We have our own separate identities, but I think there is a broader Singaporean identity. We are certainly, although the Chinese are the majority race in Singapore, but we realize that we are not China Chinese. We are definitely not. We are Singaporean Chinese.
Definitely, yes.
I think that you would say that too, right? That you are not an Indian in Indian. You are a Singaporean
Because
Indian.
there's no
So I think
connection
this is
at
the
all.
reality, right?
Yeah, that's not because there's no connection in terms of culture. Culturally, it's modern. The culture that we have is a different shape of the culture back in India.
That's right.
Indians, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we cannot identify with the things that they do, even in Singapore. We do. And so that's why there's a bit of disparity. It's almost like I find that both the communities, the Indians, Indians and Singapore Indians, we're very cliquey. I'm not going to blame them and say they only hang out with their kind. We are the same, So I went to a school the other day, a kindergarten school. I went there for a meeting. I was shocked to see all the kids were Indians. They were brilliant. I saw, when they were walking past the hallway, the way they were talking.
Jay, these are the new immigrants, right? They are not that's the yeah. In fact, I heard from
the old immigrants integrated into the society because they all felt that they needed each other.
That's right.
And there was no rat race back then for them to compete with each other.
Yeah. My Indian friends in Singapore also tell me that they feel very awkward with the particularly the northern Indians that came in, right? Because our Indians, in the Singaporean Indians, are from the South India. We are all basically of Tamil origin and so on, right?
Yeah.
So there is a difference, a cultural difference.
Yeah.
And they say to me that the northern Indians are a bit snobbish. I don't know whether that's true.
They probably call us snobbish. They probably call us the same,
Yeah. Okay. So it might be a mutual perception. But whatever it is, it's going to take time for them to adjust, right? And I think we should do our best to in a sense, acquaint them with the history of our people in Singapore, right? The Singaporean identity, right?
Yeah.
Quite natural that they will click among themselves because that's where they feel comfortable. But I think we should help
But then,
them to understand. Yeah.
I agree with that, Prof. But the thing you see, this is the weird part that I see. They can click very well with the Chinese to a large extent and the Angmos. If you were to see any in any social setting, right,
Yeah.
we can click very well with them. So we can't turn around and say, oh, they are used to their own kind. No, I think it's a matter of, like I say, integration into society.
Yeah.
Where we in Singapore, we feel that we can sit down and have a conversation with anybody and everyone. You know, those who are,
No,
you
I
know,
think identity is a very complex thing, right? And there's also social economic class,
that's
right?
true.
The
Yeah.
the recent immigrants from India, the so-called foreign talent that the government is bringing in, right, are from the upper middle class in Indian societies, and therefore they would be comfortable with the upper middle class Singaporeans, right,
Yeah.
of whatever race, right? So
Okay.
it's 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 uh it's complex, and I think that we have to recognize the fact that there are class differences. There are
Yeah.
also ethnic, cultural differences, and so on and so forth, right?
Yeah.
So I
Correct.
think the making of a new uh the reinforcing of the Singaporean identity has to be a deliberate project. It cannot be just left to things that happen by themselves, right? So I
Right.
think we, the pioneers of Singapore, right, the true blue Singaporeans
True.
have a
Right.
job to do, right?
Yes.
We
Yes.
have to communicate more clearly to the new people and welcome them into our fold, right? By having them to understand us, and we have to understand them. So this
True.
is the project, right? So the future of Singapore is not just looking outwards, right? We also need to look inwards. How
Yeah.
do we settle the differences within ourselves, as well as how do we integrate the Singapore future into the future of the region and indeed the future of Asia itself. So this is the big project, right? We have to
Yeah.
start we have to start where we can start, and that is with ourselves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, guys, I think CS is okay with the audio. You want to say something, CS?
Oh yeah. Okay. So can you hear me now?
Yes, yes.
Yes.
Okay, good. So sorry about the video. If I was sick and I didn't have very much. I only did a few hours. I could have done a lot better. But anyway, to continue from where I stopped in the video, today's China is now a after the Qing dynasty, there's no longer dynasties. It became a republic, and then after that, it became communist. And today's China, the people are very sensitive about dynasties. You will never see another president or another prime minister who is the children of another president or prime minister, because for them they've gone through the stage of dynasty. They don't want to see a dynasty ever again. They've set terms to political leadership also. Xi Jinping was made president for life, but the reason was because he has no heir, he has no son. Now, the other thing about China is, the other thing about Singapore is, I think Jay brought up about Indian businesses in Singapore. Now, in colonial Singapore, um, the there's not very much social mobility in Singapore. The rich Chinese, the business class, and the poor Chinese and the coolies are actually two very different group of people. Okay, and even among the business class, there are different groups. They are fighting each other. Like for example, this Jay mentioned about textile tradings by the Indians. Now during the initially, it was the Straits Chinese who traded textiles manufactured from the British factories in in Britain, all right, because the British factories were producing textiles cheaper than India, so the British the Straits Chinese were trading from India. After that, after a while, I think sometime in the 1930s, the Japanese caught up. So when the Japanese caught up, there was another group of people who imported uh, textiles from Japan to sell in India, to sell in Singapore. But there was in the 1930s, there was a lot of uh, re, there was a Chinese-Japanese war, and then a lot of Chinese in Singapore were caught up in the war, and they were boycotting the Chinese sellers who were selling goods from Japan. All right, and there were bomb threats and there were fights and all. But the Indians and the Malays who were bringing goods from Japan, the Chinese don't touch them. So again, it's money. Yeah, a lot of it is money. Uh, Alliances, money. You know, when you talk about uh, harmony between different races, if there's something to be gained from it, there will be harmony. If there's something is if there's a threat to the business, then there will be fights. Now, the other thing that Jay brought up was immigrations from the from India to Singapore, especially the poor coolies, they call it indentured coolies who were working in the rubber plantation. this happened during this happened immediately after uh, India became independent. Now, after after 19 India became independent 1949, I think. After that, in the 1950s, China became communist. And when China became communist, a lot of Chinese coolies went back to China. All right, because they communism is good for the poor, right? So they think that the landowners, the capitalists, it will all be will have to share the wealth with the poor. So the coolies who were working in the rubber plantation were replaced by the Indians from India. So during the 1950s, 1960s, the suicide rate for the Indian population was because of overcrowding and all the poverty, overcrowding, TB. The suicide rate for the Indian population was actually the highest compared to the Chinese and the and the Malays and all lah. That was because I think there was more during the 1950s. There was more overcrowding uh, by the Indian community than the Chinese community or the Malay community, or of course the Caucasian communities. Yeah, so there must be an effort by the government to improve social mobility. I think what Lee Kuan Yew did right was uh, when he took over government, when PAP took over government in the 1950s, 1960s, there was an effort to improve social mobility across uh, across across all the races. All right, people, you get very cheap education. You get you get a choice of whether you want to go to the English school or Chinese school or Malay school. The fees are cheap, and then there's public housing. You know, people who are homeless, people who are squatters, get to live in HDB flats, which were relatively cheap at that time. But things have changed since 1950s, 1960s. So we have changed quite a fair bit since the first time PAP has taken power.
Actually, thank you, CS, for this clarification, which I think is very, very important. When we discuss the different cultural or linguistic groups and so on, that the social class differences have to be taken into account, right? Even when Alex was talking about the Chinese businesses in Singapore, yes, of course, they were the well-to-do classes, right? But what about the Chinese coolie class? They were the really downtrodden, And in fact, quite often they were mistreated even by the Chinese upper classes, right? I think the same would have happened with the Indian Muslim community as well as the Indian community and so on. So it's a very natural thing that there would be social class differences, right? So I think this has to be taken into account. Yes, I agree that one of the achievements of the PAP government is to actually enlarge the middle class. And therefore, there was some social mobility from the lower classes upwards to into the middle classes, right? Unfortunately, in the more recent economy, there's some shedding of the middle class, right? The upper middle class are kind of moving into the middle, and the middle going down to the lower middle. So this is the kind of effect of the economic transformation that's happening. Okay, so
Okay, just jump in a bit. As Prof has mentioned, CS is a historian and he's actually written a book about the Chinese in Singapore. CS, maybe you can type in the chat group the name of your book so that those of us who are interested can purchase it from Amazon. And Jay, I think was it your grandfather who wrote a book about the Tamils in Singapore? Maybe
No,
you
the people, the family that he brought down, they wrote a book. His name is Masudu, quite an established guy in the Indian Muslim community in Singapore. He works with the government as well. So he has wrote a book about Singapore Tamil Muslims actually.
hold on.
Yeah.
let me take a screenshot of that. Hold on.
Yeah, I can send it to you. Yeah.
Yeah. Singapore Tamil Muslims. Got it.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
So this is quite detailed and talk about the pioneers and all that. So yeah.
Okay, I think, Prof, you want to open up the floor to...
actually, I have a question for CS regarding dynastic politics in China, even today. CS, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm listening.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, you mentioned about Xi Jinping and so on. Would you make some comment about the so-called princeling class?
Oh, okay.
Isn't there a kind of contestation going on among the princeling class? First of all, define what is a princeling, and is there such a thing as a kind of contest going on?
Yes. Princeling class simply means that these are children of past leaders, Deng Xiaoping, Mao Zedong, Bo Xinglai himself is one of all those old pioneer ministers and so on. Now, when they during the Cultural Revolution, a lot of them were sent to all over China. So they grew up.
Yeah. Xi Jinping was sent to the countryside there.
Then his children, all that, they were sent to the countryside and all. Now, so they all grew up in different areas. So when they grew up, they have their parents to push them to advance politically. All right, but at the same time, I mean, among the parents, the parents are fighting among themselves, or at least they are contesting within themselves, not fighting, contesting tacitly among themselves. And when they are trying to push their own children up, this priestling will also be contesting among themselves. So there's no um uh there's no uniform. It's just there's a lot of faction in China, right? Po Xinglai could have been the chairman of the Communist Party and become the president of China. If he had been, then Xi Jinping would be nobody. Nobody. So again, now when Xi Jinping came up, when Xi Jinping was made the president for life, now you see, usually when there are different factions, they make an agreement. One faction will choose the president, another faction will choose the premier. So at least there's a kind of a separation of powers, or a balance. Now, when Xi Jinping was made president for life, for his, that means he became president for the third term. His premier was removed. All right, has have to retire after 2 terms. So in the sense, Xi Jinping has consolidated power, but only for his generation, because after Xi Jinping, he doesn't have an heir. Then it will be, you have to be somebody from at least from his faction, but not his family, who would take power.
Okay, so I think this is the point which I think we all should become conscious of, that family dynamics is still very much part of our kind of understanding of, who do we hand power to, who do we prefer to be our partners, who do we prefer to be within our collegiate group, and so on and so forth. It's very, very human in a sense, right? And this is the point, that even in a communist meritocratic system, right, or Singaporean meritocracy, there is always this tension between affiliation to the 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 number one, right? Right. For example, we have politicians who have relationship with certain other politicians through their family connections and so on, and they are, in a sense, preferred or felt to be more akin to the outlook of the people in power, something like that. Now, this is the dilemma, isn't it? It's a human dilemma between modernity, because modernity relies on the autonomy of reason, and reason has to be the presiding factor, the decisive factor as to who is meritorious, right? Measured by some kind of a system of measurement that has nothing to do with family or clan or race relations, right? So this is the challenge that that we have in modern societies, right? But lurking behind this modern aspiration of meritocratic leadership, right, of choice of meritocratic partners or leaders, right, is this lurking behind of certain familial or clan or whatever type of relationship. So this is the challenge that we must face. So if Singapore is to proceed ahead in a modern way, then we must be aware of this issue. That's all I have to say. Anybody wants to add to it?
Apart from clans and families, there's also school ties. Now,
Yes.
in Chinese politics, the ministers and the people at the very top are almost always taken from 6 universities in Beijing. Right, so a lot of students are first year students in these 6 universities. They are some talk among themselves. Right, okay,
Yeah.
we are all from these universities. All of us will probably go into administration in the government. Let's not study for masters. Let's not study for PhDs. All right, let's go get into the system. We all network with each other, and then when we all climb up, we will be a network. So you'll be one school fighting another school. So it is politics is brutal in China. In business, it may be better, but again, business you can come from different schools. You can come from, but you have to be to work very closely with the some political leaders. Otherwise, your business will not grow.
Yes.
Yeah. But one thing about Chinese business is I think that China itself is very egalitarian. If you look at the number of billionaires in China, um, they are not just in Beijing or Shanghai. They are, I think the top, they are the billionaires are all over Hangzhou, Shenzhen, Chengdu, compared to, let's say, India, where you have all the billionaires in either Delhi or Mumbai, or even in USA. I think most of the billionaires are in New York or California. But in China, they're all over. It depends. Again, they're all over because their business started at different parts of China, and they are allied with different groups of Chinese leaders. Of course, if you are allied with the right group, you grow up very quickly. If you allied with the wrong group, you don't grow as much. So in a sense, China still has communist roots.
Yeah, and communism is basically a meritocratic system. Is that what you're saying?
Is No, it's supposed to be shared. Like for example, Xi Jinping now has is populist. Is populist. Xi Jinping has now decided to, you know, the inequality in China is very big, right? So he has decided to hit the tech people, Alibaba and all, to hit at the property developers, to hit at the rich. Then recently, I think they hit at the influencers. You know, the lot of influencers are promoting. You know, they get sponsorship to promote uh, um, staying in luxury hotel and so on. And this is something which the government didn't want to encourage. So they get hit, and then they get, and then of course the tutoring industry, because the tutoring industry does the tutoring industry will also create inequality in the education system, right?
Yeah, because
The
only
people,
the
yeah,
rich can afford to
yeah.
employ
The
tutors. Yeah.
best tutors and so these are so communism is populism, but of course, um, yeah, yeah. It tries to reduce
Yeah.
inequality.
So the ideology of communism is actually
It's
equality,
equality, yeah,
right?
yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
but of
yeah,
course it's not perfect, lah. Of course, it's not
yeah,
perfect, and
yeah.
there are elements that is even more capitalist than America.
Yeah.
Prof, we have a
So the
question.
issue that is confronting all of us in Singapore as well is the politics of affiliation, right? So the affiliation could be ideological. That means if you are a member of a particular of the ruling party, and therefore you are affiliated to the party, therefore you are looked upon in a more favorable light. If you are a member of a different political party, that means you are not affiliated to the ruling party. Therefore, you are looked on with some suspicion. So this is the politics of affiliation. In the past, affiliation was based on family connections, and then later it became business connections, right? And underlying all of that is race connections, and then social class connections. And then, as you also mentioned, right, if you come from the same school, right, you are also the same, you have the same kind of affiliation to your old schoolmates. So this is how affiliation works in politics, right? So in Singapore, we are trying to overcome this because we are aspiring to be a modern society, right? A modern society is a meritocratic society that is based on the merit of a person, right, and his worth in terms of his ability to contribute to the development of the whole society as a whole, and not to do so in a way that only benefits his own affiliates. So I think this is the challenge that we are facing.
Prof, we have a question from the audience. Can I ask for him?
Yes.
Martin has said that he agrees with Prof Tay when he cites the socio-economic dynamics is important, and he thinks critical in the decline of social mobility in Singapore. Status and money with connections makes it easier for young alpha generation, even Generation Z, to advance and succeed when they reach adulthood. And he further asks, our new Prime Minister, PM Wong, recognizes that social mobility and social compact is down, is not as strong as it was before, and he hopes to create an atmosphere for unknowns and those who come from low income to eventually climb up like how they did in LKY time. Now, I think a lot of you may know that PM Wong didn't come from elite school. He's not from RI, he's not from ACS. And do you agree with Martin that PM Wong is trying to make a difference? Anyone? Prof?
Actually, I'm not very clear what is his question.
He says, I'll repeat. Prime Minister Wong recognizes that social mobility and social compact is down, and he hopes to create an atmosphere for unknowns and those who come from the lower income to eventually climb up like how they did during LKY time. So he mentioned that he spoke to PM Wong just half a year ago, and they exchanged thoughts about his own success and how it may be harder or even impossible for him to do so if he were just a child now. So he's saying that probably the times are different from the previous generations of prime ministers.
Yeah, I think that social mobility is a very important aspect of a democratic society. Let's put it very simply. Democracy depends on the creation and maintenance of a middle class, right? The maintenance of a middle class does not mean that the middle class must exclude all other classes. In fact, the role of the middle class in building a democracy is to ensure that as many people as possible can rise up into the middle class, and that the upper classes must respect the majority that is in the middle class. Democracy is a middle class concept. Let's be clear about that. If it does, even if a democracy, if a nation that claims to be a democracy is unable to sustain the creation and the maintenance of a middle class, then it has failed.
Martin, if I see as Prof answer your question. Yes. Okay.
Did I hear one more? You asked if he's trying to connect the dots to make this work for all levels of people in the class. I think in this that's his rally, isn't it? I mean, with the Forward Singapore movement, that's what he claims that he will want to do, and that's what he wants to do, to make sure that everybody is heard. He even came and said that it doesn't matter if you have a degree or not, you will still be able to be successful in Singapore. I mean, whether that can be done or not, only time will tell. But we have to give him a chance, of course, to try and see if it works. And so whether he's trying or not, I think that he has put it on in writing. Now let's see if the man can act it out. That's all.
Prof, I think Lawson now wants to ask a question.
Okay.
Lawson, you unmute yourself.
Oh, okay. Hi. Sorry, my camera is a bit faulty, so I'll just speak through the microphone. So I wish to speak very briefly, to share a little bit about myself and my job search. Is that okay?
Yeah, go ahead.
I think it's related to the topic. That's all right, yeah?
Yeah, go ahead, Lawrence.
Okay. So just a bit about myself. I progressed from the normal technical stream. I went to Poly. I went to ITE. I went to Temasek Poly. I went to external degree course. So it was akin to like maybe taking O levels every year, because we were assessed by yearly exams. We go to examination hall and all that. And then I made it to NTU. I graduated with a Master of Science degree. So I was actually, feeling that it's a very long journey, and I decided to persevere because I believe that, okay, I'm younger, maybe I don't have enough of merit. That's why opportunities are not available for me, or it's extremely tough to get any good development or internship opportunities and all that. So I tell myself, I will just put that aside and focus on my studies and focus on doing well. But unfortunately, the outcome is, despite all the perseverance, doors remain closed. And I wish to share that what is most disappointing is, I understand that public sector, is funded publicly, private sector is funded privately. So even for public sector jobs, right, it's so difficult to even get consideration. So sometimes I wonder, my many years of persevering, was I being a fool of the system? It's like, there's also very little accountability. If I were to ask, the human resource practitioner or the hiring manager, whoever's in charge, they cannot give me any, I would say, solid reasons to say, oh, okay, we are not willing to give you a chance because of A, B, and C. They'll give a very, very vague answer. So I think maybe there could be a certain system that is not very visible that it's happening in Singapore. Just that we perhaps have not named it properly, identified it properly. But I think there's a system that is not very, very good. Maybe one of it is the lack of work ethic and accountability. So this is what I wish to share. Thank you.
Prof, can I take a crack at answering?
Who's going to answer?
Alfred.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I was actually, I know the situation you are in. I was in the Singapore Computer Systems for 5 years, and then I went to Singapore Poly. And when I left Poly, I was like unemployed for 6 months. And I really wanted to go inside GovTech. So what I thought is that I'll approach my MP, Member of Parliament, Ms. Foo Mee Ha, to see whether she could write a letter to GovTech to give me a recommendation. And actually she did. She wrote a letter, she CC'd me, and I was offered an interview, but by that time I already secured a position in another private firm. So maybe one of the avenues, Lawson, that you can try is to approach your MP in the Meet the People session and ask them to write a recommendation letter. Every little bit helps.
Yeah, actually, Lawson, your story is quite disturbing, you know, because Singapore system prides itself to be a
How old are you, Lawson?
meritocratic system. Hello? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Lawson, can you hear me?
Yes.
I think he can, but we
Yes,
can't
I can hear you. I wasn't able to unmute. So maybe it'll be helpful. I'll just give some clarification. This year I'm turning 35 years old. No, I'm not a saint, but I have quite a clean record. So I'm not a criminal or terrorist or anything like that. So my record is quite clean. I've served my national service. Yeah, and the suggestion by Alfred, I have done it before. I went to my MP, and very unfortunate, he told me that it's I told him a few problems. First is housing, and second was jobs. And basically his response was, it's a very normal problem. And there's nothing we can do about it. And he gave me the example of him being a chief executive officer of a very big company. I understand, if I'm not wrong, it's NTUC FairPrice. Then he says, if I have one secretary position that maybe you can qualify, but I have maybe 300 Singaporeans applying. No, I'm very sorry, Lawson. I think if you're rejected, that's just too bad. You're a good candidate, but that's just too bad. So if I could use a very simple example, let's say Professor Tay Kheng Soon, somehow he found out that his grandfather left him a gold mine, and he picks up small little gold nuggets, which maybe may seem insignificant, but will he be wasteful enough to throw it into the Singapore River? I don't think so. I'm sure everything that comes up from that mine, he will make sure that it's being processed.
Let me interject here, Lawson. Your case is a very unusual case, no? If the guy who told you, the MP who told you that yours is a very unusual case is completely wrong. Okay? The
told me it's normal.
It's damn abnormal. It is damn abnormal because you have started all the way up from IT, all the way up to doing a master degree in NTU. How can that be normal? That is an incredible achievement. And if the system cannot recognize that, that's something wrong with the system. Yes. Okay.
Yes.
So let's be clear about that.
So
don't sit back and blame yourself. Okay. Blame the system. Tell the system off.
Yeah, I looked at myself and I asked myself, what is the reason? So I really examined, I look at the people they hire and all that. So just now there was talk about concepts like guanxi, connections, maybe social circles and all that. So I realized all that matters, and maybe
you should just join the PAP to start off. Okay? Then your affiliation will be a factor. I mean, this to me is rather sickening, that
Prof,
should be put under this kind of problem.
Prof. No, it's Prof. Is that your solution? That if you are in a dilemma, join the PAP?
No, because
that should be a new slogan for them.
His case, Lawson's case, is really ridiculous. You have the highest qualification that is possible, right, for a young person, and yet you cannot get a job.
Yeah.
Something is damn wrong, right?
I cannot get a
That's the dilemma.
commensurate job, Professor. I cannot get a commensurate job. I have to qualify that. I can't get a commensurate job. I can get a call center job, but you know, I'm being told by the HRs that they say this is an outsourced job. We have it in Singapore. We can promote you once, but that's it, and you'll
So
be stuck in the job.
you should get at least a managerial level job, right?
Yes, at least an assistant manager to start off.
Whatever managerial level, okay?
Yes.
And we all know that in the system in Singapore, your academic qualification is a very important dimension in whether you are a managerial class or you are not in the managerial class. If you have a university degree, you are in the managerial class, okay? So if they are not allowing you into the managerial class, I don't know, whatever place you applied for, right? Then there's something seriously wrong.
Yes, I applied to many.
And I think you
many
should find out
places.
why is something wrong. What is the rank wrong?
Yeah, so I will ask the hiring manager for feedback. I will ask the HR for feedback. Basically, their response is we cannot say anything. And when they do grudgingly give a response, it's a very, very big answer.
Do they give you a response in writing?
Usually it's a standard template. You know, they will say very standard things. Or we have considered your application carefully.
Then you should report this matter to the Civil Service Commission.
Yeah, so I wish to bring up another point. Since you're an older person, I had a colleague by the name of VG Menon. I think relevant to the discussion today. She's an Indian, you know, she's an older Indian. So before she passed on, I asked her, you know, I said, you know, how did you get your job? You know, she worked as a very senior civil servant. So she told me many years ago, Public Service Division would hire centrally. So you go to PSD, you write down your choices, rank 1, 2, 3, and so on. And then, you know, you don't have to know anyone, you know, in the ministries, you don't have to know anyone. PSD will objectively say, okay, you're a very good fit for 1, 2, and 3. And based on the vacancies, we'll send you to your first choice. And that's the end of the story. You get your job. And after that, you have to perform.
Okay, I want to suggest to you right now. We have a new Prime Minister, Lawrence Wong, right? Who talks about, you know, inclusiveness and so on, and better Singapore and all of those kinds of aspirations. You must write to him, give him your full resume, give him the record of all the jobs that you have applied and which have been turned down with no good reason, and ask him to intervene on your behalf. It's his job. Because it is his job to make sure that the system works, right? Because your example tells everybody that the system is not working for some people. Why?
Yeah, so I'm actually quite a diligent person. I listened to our new Prime Minister's inaugural speech. And after that, you know, I decided to write to him.
You have?
I did not get a response, you know, from his press secretary or his principal private secretary. But after that, you know, they basically got Workforce Singapore to call me. And on the same day, I decided, after speaking with Workforce Singapore for about 2 hours, the conclusion from Workforce Singapore was there's nothing much they can do. They can only provide feedback, and whether the feedback has action items after that, it's really up to the party they provide the feedback to. And then subsequently, I called the principal private secretary and I tried my luck, and surprisingly, he picked up the phone and I had 15 minutes to talk to him. And basically, he told me the solution for now is to work with career coach. And I said, you know, I've done this for many years, you know, different career coaches, WSG, and now is basically their partner, they outsource some of the career coach function. I'm doing with the WSG partner. And you know, previously, even in my university was the same thing. So I said, I've gone through all this. I'm not sure what difference it will make.
Lawson, your case is very, very unusual, very unique. No, I don't think anybody in, you know, amongst our group here has ever experienced anybody with this kind of problem, you know, right? With a higher degree, right, and cannot get a job.
Yeah, and I have a clean record as well. I'm not a saint, but I have a clean record.
Something is definitely wrong. Something is definitely wrong.
Can I say something? Can I say
Hello?
something? Okay.
Yes, yes, go
Can I
ahead.
say something? Okay. During I'm talking about Singapore. During the early PAP days, we have very little graduates, and then at the same time, we close, right? We close our employment to only Singaporeans. Malaysians cannot come and work. Graduates from Taiwan University cannot teach in Singapore schools. So graduates in Singapore during the 60s and 70s, they do very well. Now today we have made it very difficult for, let's say, for Lawson to go to university. I think by the time he graduates with a master's, he's already 35. But we have thrown the doors open to people from all kinds of universities all over the world, and when they graduate with a master's, they are only 24, 23, 24, because they don't even do national service. Now, so we are in a situation where if you have gone to a local university, it's so hard to get in, it's hard to go through, and you're so at a certain age, and then you have a lot of job applicants. Like, let's say for example, in United States is also very hard to get a job because there are so many graduates. Now, so what happens is this: if you're a fresh graduate, you have no experience, you take up an internship for free. Now, of course, again, if you come from a wealthy family, you can, it's like going, you can become you go to work in Hollywood, you take up gig jobs for free and so on, just to get yourself exposed, just to get yourself connected to the people in the industry. But the thing is, um if you are at 30 over years old, it is difficult to take up an internship for free. And also, if you don't come from a wealthy family, because if you're a wealthy family, they don't depend on you for income. You don't need an income to buy your HDB or whatever. So for the in America, it's easier if you come from middle class family. You do it immediately after graduation. You do an internship for free, get yourself connected. But in Singapore, it is the system. I don't know. It's stuck. We are kind of stuck somewhere in the past, in the 60s and 70s, and then at the same time we have so many people coming in, so we don't know. We are lost. I think the Singaporeans are lost.
Prof,
I wish to share some insights, right? Just 3 points. I'll just briefly say. The first is about opportunity in terms of internship and development. Second is about experience I had in my alma mater, NTU. And third is quite scary for me to share. Basically, my meeting with the manpower minister. I'm thinking whether I should share or not, but I think it could be worth sharing so that maybe, there could be potential for feedback, because I share the reason why I wish to share.
Not on record. Cut the recording.
Yeah, maybe the manpower minister one I can share next time.
Okay, I think Lawson, CS made a very interesting
Yes.
suggestion. You should now volunteer to work in a social enterprise for free. All right? You can afford it. And then use that as a basis for you to go further. Or you might just continue in the social enterprise. There are so many social enterprises that are looking for good people. Just go and join them, right? And they will be very happy to employ you or include you even for a nominal sum. They are all budget tight. Do that. Okay. So I think we cannot go further in this discussion, because then you will become very, very personal, right? And I don't think we want to do that. So thank you,
Yes.
Lawson, for sharing your situation.
Yes, if I were just to make one point, I would just like to say, right, I think the principle of meritocracy should always be upheld. And while connections matter a lot, I mean, we're after all a human society, right? But there has to be avenues for
Yeah, we agree. We all agree on that, and definitely, and we sympathize with you, right? So please, do what CS has suggested. So proceed. Thank you.
Just one last thing. Lawson's case is not unique. Both Jen Chan and Martin say they have encountered friends who also have higher degrees, higher education levels, but still are not able to secure jobs. So it's not a unique case.
Okay, any other questions, responses?
Huh? Yeah.
Go ahead, go ahead.
Unmute. Okay. Unmute. No. I give you permission. You need to click.
But it doesn't work.
Yes.
Okay, yeah. I just want to bring you a point of history. Go back to the early days, when the economy was trading, primeval trading. Singapore wasn't industrialized. We're talking about the days when Boat Quay, we had all the barges, pure trading. Just about the only manufacturing would be the tankaki and the Misum pineapple. How do people survive? Education was not what it is today. So the starters, they start their own business, self-employed, self-reliance. Now, this idea, this spirit of going into business, self-sufficiency, self-employment, it's a very powerful drive. It's something that a force that to be reckoned with. You are your own boss. But then circumstances was different in those days. You're talking about rental. Rent-controlled prices, rent-controlled property. It was pervading. I mean, people rent out with controlled rentals. We're talking about a storehouse, shop house for what is it, $45, $35 in the 1940s, just after the war, or up to 1950s. So my point is, people struggle to earn a living, and they had no choice. Either they join the triad society or start your own little business. And thus that concept of the SMEs. Okay, that's what I have to say.
Yeah, I think Alex, the issue of jobs and economy is a crucial issue, And I was going to jump in later on this point, but maybe we should have another session on the economy, in terms, because right now you have young people who are finding it difficult to retain a job. There's a lot more retrenchment going on. You see a lot of guys are driving Grab cars and doing deliveries, right? You have hundreds and hundreds every day doing deliveries because the retrenchment is going to increase. Why? Because the global situation, right? There's a decline in the overall global economy, right? And Singapore is directly impacted by global economy, right? Because all our foreign investors. I mean, the most important one now is Shell, right? Shell has sold off Bukom and sold off their investments in Jurong Island. This is a very, very serious happening, right?
Yeah.
Because Shell is one of the major backbones of Singapore economy, and they are leaving Singapore, right? So our global city role is slowly eroding, right? And there, unless we develop some other regional connection, economy, and relation to China and so on, we are going to be in deep trouble, and people like Lawrence are going to get even worse, right? So this is going to be a very big issue, which we will have to discuss on another session, right? So I think that we have come more or less to the end of our discussion, right? So Alfred, do you want to continue or
No, there's no more questions.
any more?
Nope. Okay, so I thank everyone for joining us tonight. hope it's useful to you. And we'll see you next time. If for the next Zoom session, right, just tune in to Prof Tay's Facebook or my Facebook, and then we'll announce when the next Zoom session will be. So thank you, everyone, and good night.
Right. Thank you all very much. Good night.
Good night.